With 26 minutes to go before the top of 8 o'clock, thank you so much for staying with us here on the South African Morning. Of course, the Sunday edition, the Father's Day edition of the South African Morning. That is great to be in your company until 9 o'clock. Let's move to the story. Less lamenting over youth unemployment and more action to create jobs. That is what the Youth Employment Service is calling for. It believes that young people need to be the game changers in South Africa. So to discuss this matter further, I am joined now by the CEO of the Youth Employment Service, Ravi Naidu. Ravi, thank you so much for your time. A very good morning to you. Let's talk a little bit about this. I mean, we keep speaking about the unemployment statistics, especially where young people are concerned. And it seems as though we may have different pockets of society, including now Gauteng government, coming up with anecdotes to be able to solve this issue. It's just such a vast issue. And you're saying the time for talk is over, the time for action is now. How do we act?
Yes, thanks very much, Faith, and very good to be on the show. Yeah, so I think when we talk about unemployment, we always start with how bad it is, and it doesn't seem to be at the macro level be improving, and so on. So we know a lot about what's happening in terms of unemployment. What we need to do is really start to focus on what we're doing about employment. So I think that needs to happen on two levels. Obviously, for the country as a whole, we really need the government to work very closely with business to deal with load shedding and the ports and the railways and crime and investment and regulation. That's wonderful. But what we're doing at the Youth Employment Service, it's really a private sector contribution. Companies join the program and they sponsor youth into jobs. And we are doing 3,000 or so a month, so 32,000. Last year, and these youth go into fairly high quality jobs, drone pilots, coding, baristas, green technology, and so on. And then we want them, and the theory is they become professionals and become some of the entrepreneurs we need to catalyze development in the community. So we can't fix the economy as one program, but we think the more we can do to get companies and individuals and communities involved in giving talented youth a chance to really become team players in the economy, the better it is. So let's get as many young people as possible to also be the game changers that the country needs in the economy.
Ravi, let's stay with matters here of the private sector then. Okay, so because a lot of times what happens within especially the space of private sectors, though they come on board from a funding perspective, from saying, listen, we want to be able to absorb some of these young people. Unfortunately, within the context, even with that, is that a lot of companies create what I call and what many people that deal with young people call professional interns or professional learners. So these young people will hop from learnership to learnership to learnership, or from internship to internship to internship. They will never get permanent employment. They don't necessarily get absorbed full-time for even a 5 or 2 year fixed-term contract within the state of institution that they're working in. And they just keep hopping from one space to the next space. Though they may be incubated for about a period of 6 months or so, it doesn't do justice for a sustainable youth development and sustainable economic impact. How then do we start addressing the very same private sector partners to say it's one thing to absorb for 6 months, it's a different thing altogether to actually keep and sustain and train these young people within these areas of a focus?
Yes, and I think that's a very important point, because the type of program makes a big difference. So in general, a 6-month program, which is maybe better than nothing, but the quality of the program, the duration of the program matters. So we would focus on a 12-month program, ideally longer, and it's got to be where the person works in the private sector, and the type of job is something which has a career path. And then you have to do a lot of monitoring and evaluation on what has happened to that person today. So I think that we probably as a country put a lot of money and have a lot of programs that are less than effective. And it's better to focus on the more impactful programs. So our program, I can only talk for that, is highly regulated in the sense that when we mean a job, we mean someone with a long-term contract, a permanent contract at the end, and we monitor that. And now, depending on the type of program, if it's a more technology type of program, absorption could be 100%. Some of the programs where people are going into maybe education, social jobs, it's lower because the government is the employer, and it's harder then for the person to be absorbed to that. but overall about 40 to 50%. And obviously we want it to be more. So I think it really comes down to program design. I do think the government, and our program also doesn't take government money. It's private sector pays, and therefore the private sector wants its own benefits, but they can claim for a successful program. I think if we took the government funding for youth programs and the private sector programs we're talking about and really tried to ensure we had good design for impact, even though you're not employing in these programs 5 million people, but let's say employing a few 100,000 people in total, those 100,000 themselves, can go on to put their shoulder to the wheel for the economy. And I think that's really what we want to do. While the big economic issues are being resolved by business and government together, trying to find an agreement to grow the economy, we need every day to get as many talented people into the game as possible.
Where would you say, are the areas of interest from a private sector perspective in terms of absorption? Because sometimes I feel like, the young people have got this notion, and it's not their fault, really. I think everybody has done it once upon a time in their lives, where they literally spray. So they spray the CVs across the different sectors of industry, and then they pray that somebody picks it up. What we tend to do is neglect the fact that some companies actually are downsizing. So they've got fewer human capital, but then they've tried to maximize their impact so that they maximize their dividend payout and they maximize their output, right, from a profit perspective. So there is no opportunities for absorption there. But where are those specific areas of interest where, you've got, sectors of industry that are saying we are desperate for this youth market, we are desperate for skilled human capital?
Yeah, so I think that's, there are some sectors in the economy that are still growing and even under current conditions. So obviously these will be some of your financial services. We are a services economy largely. So services, anything to do with solar is a huge shortage, anything to do with coding, IT, those are the obvious ones. And I think they all have a good future. I think companies are looking for anyone who is who can show that they can self-manage themselves well in terms of administrative activities. So I think there's a general sort of admin function, but it's limited. But companies are looking for people who can self-administer. So I think those would be the key. The ones with the future, you can just look at it and say, oh, these sectors are going to grow in the future. And jobs where people can show that they are able to think through and solve a problem. Or, it comes down, I think what we find from all our surveys, Faith, is that there are certain things a young person can do to improve their chances. And if they take up those things, it does make a big difference. So I think there is a generic need for a person like that, but there are certain sectors which are quite, which we're seeing growth in terms of jobs.
Ravi, we'll leave it there for this morning. Much appreciated for your time. Ravi Vinayat is the CEO of the Youth Employment Service, just talking to us a little bit here about how young people can better place themselves within these different sectors of industry. The time for talking is over. I think the time for action is now.